Professor Linda Martinez had it all planned out. Her Math and Society lecture today would expose how billionaire tech CEOs like Elon Musk weren't actually mathematical geniuses, but privileged business people who hired real experts to do the hard work. She'd challenge her students to see through the myth of the self-made genius and recognize the role of privilege and luck in success. Her whiteboard was ready with an impossibly complex rocket trajectory problem, one she was certain would prove her point about why someone like Musk couldn't possibly understand the mathematics behind his own companies. Today, we'll examine how wealth and privilege create the illusion of genius, she told her packed lecture hall, clicking to a slide with Elon Musk's face. Some people think they're geniuses when really they just got lucky. What Professor Martinez didn't realize was that the quiet man in the baseball cap sitting in the back row wasn't a regular student. It was Elon Musk himself who had seen tweets about her lecture and decided to attend unannounced. And when she asked for a volunteer to attempt her impossible math problem, she had no idea she was about to witness firsthand just how wrong her assumptions were. Professor Linda Martinez walked into the big lecture hall with quick steps. She was 5 minutes late, but that was part of her plan. Make them wait a little, build the excitement. And it worked. The room was packed. Students filled every seat. Some even sat on the steps along the sides. They all came to see her famous Math and Society class. Everyone on campus talked about it. Linda smiled as she put her coffee and laptop down on the desk. She pushed her glasses up and looked at the sea of young faces. Many of them were already taking out notebooks. Some held phones ready to record her words. Perfect. Sorry, I'm late, she said. Not sorry at all. Let's jump right in. Today's topic is one I've been excited about all semester. She clicked a button on her laptop. The big screen behind her lit up with a picture of Elon Musk standing next to a rocket. His familiar face looked out at the crowd with that half smile he always had in photos. A few students whispered to each other. One boy in the front row wore a SpaceX t-shirt. He sat up straighter, looking interested. Today, Linda said, her voice getting louder. We're talking about luck versus skill, about how some people think they're geniuses when really they just got lucky. She clicked again. Now the screen showed Elon as a young man standing next to his first car. Elon Musk, she said his name slowly. Time magazine's Person of Year. The man who wants to take people to Mars. The world's richest person. She paused. But is he really as smart as people think? Or did he just get lucky breaks that others didn't get? In the back row, a man shifted in his seat. He wore a plain baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. His face was partly hidden behind a short beard. No one paid any attention to him. He was just another student, maybe a little older than the others. No one knew that under that cap was the very man on the screen. Elon Musk himself sat quietly watching. He hadn't planned to come. That morning, he had been scrolling through social media when he saw students posting about Professor Martinez's lecture. She's going to expose how Elon Musk isn't really a genius, one tweet said. Normally, he would ignore such things. But something about this made him curious. So he put on his simplest clothes and drove himself to the university. Now he watched as Linda clicked through more slides. She showed charts of his company's stock prices. She talked about government loans his businesses got. She mentioned his rich family, though she got many facts wrong about that. People call him a genius, Linda continued. But let's think about this. Does he actually do the complex math needed for rocket science? Does he personally design the electric car engines? Of course not. He hires actual geniuses to do that work, then takes the credit. The SpaceX fan in the front row raised his hand. But doesn't he have engineering degrees? And I read that he checks all the technical designs himself. Linda gave the boy a patient smile. He has undergraduate degrees, yes, but that hardly qualifies someone to understand the complex mathematics behind rocket trajectories or artificial intelligence algorithms. At the back of the room, Elon fought the urge to speak up. This wasn't the first time someone had underestimated him. In fact, it had happened his whole life. He was used to it. So today, Linda said, walking to the whiteboard, I'm going to show you something interesting. I've prepared a calculus problem about rocket trajectories and fuel efficiency. She began writing a complex equation on the board. This is the kind of advanced math that SpaceX engineers work with. The equation filled half the board. It had integrals, vectors, and Greek symbols. Many students looked confused already. Now, I need a volunteer, Linda said, turning back to face the class. Who wants to try solving this? The room went quiet. The problem looked impossible. Even math majors in the class stared at it with wide eyes. No one, Linda asked, her smile growing. That's what I thought. Because this is truly complex mathematics, not something you can fake your way through, not something you learn in a basic college class. This takes years of specialized study. Slowly, a hand went up in the back row. The mighty true man in the baseball cap raised his arm. Linda looked surprised. She hadn't expected anyone to volunteer. Ah, we have a brave soul. Come on down, sir. Elon stood up. He walked down the steps toward the front of the room. Students turned to watch him pass. No one recognized him. What's your name? Linda asked as he reached the front. Just call me E, he said quietly, keeping his head slightly down. Well, E, have you studied calculus before? A little, he answered. Linda handed him a marker. She expected him to stare helplessly at the problem. This would prove her point perfectly. Even smart students couldn't do this kind of math without years of training. Take your time, she said with a hint of smugness. And don't worry if you can't solve it. Almost no one could without specialized education. Elon looked at the problem carefully. He recognized it immediately. It was about calculating the optimal fuel mixture and burn rate for a rocket launch, taking into account atmospheric density changes during ascent. Not only did he understand it, but he saw a flaw in how Linda had set it up. Her equation wasted fuel at the upper atmosphere transition. He began to write. The marker squeaked against the board as he worked through the steps with ease. The room was so quiet you could hear people breathing. Linda's smile began to fade as she watched. This wasn't going according to plan. The man wasn't struggling at all. In fact, he worked with the confident speed of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. After 3 minutes of rapid writing, Elon added the final line to the solution. Then he did something unexpected. He wrote a second equation below it. Your original problem works, he said, pointing to his solution. But this alternate approach would save about 15% more fuel by adjusting the mixture ratio during the atmospheric transition. He handed the marker back to Linda, who stood frozen in place. A student in the third row suddenly sat up straight. He looked from the board to Elon and back again. Then he pulled out his phone and did a quick search. Oh my God, the student said loudly. That's Elon Musk. The room erupted in chaos. Students jumped from their seats, pulling out phones to take pictures. Some rushed toward the front of the room. Others shouted questions. The quiet classroom turned into a noisy mess in seconds to its toys. Really him? Elon Musk is in our class. Can I get a selfie? Professor Linda Martinez stood frozen, the marker still in her hand. Her face turned from pale to red as she realized what had happened. The man she had tried to make look foolish was the very person she had been talking about. And he had just solved her impossible problem, even improved it in front of everyone. Please, everyone sit down. She finally said, her voice shaking. No one listened. The students crowded around Elon, who looked uncomfortable with all the attention. Quiet, Linda shouted, surprising even herself with how loud her voice was. The room slowly quieted down. Return to your seats right now or I'll cancel class for the day. Slowly, reluctantly, students moved back to their seats, but they kept their phones out, recording everything. Linda knew videos of this would be all over the internet within minutes. Her carefully planned lecture was ruined. Elon stood awkwardly at the board, hands in his pockets. "Sorry for the disruption," he said. "I just came to listen." Linda took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. This was not how things were supposed to go. She had spent her whole life proving herself in the math world. And now this, growing up in a small town, Linda had always been the smartest kid in class. Math came easily to her when other kids struggled. By third grade, she was doing sixth grade math. By high school, she was taking college courses. But being smart didn't make her popular. Other kids called her professor as a joke. Boys didn't ask her to dances. She learned to find comfort in numbers and equations instead of friends. At least numbers made sense. They followed rules. They didn't laugh at you behind your back. When she got to college, Linda finally found her place. The math department became her home. Her professors recognized her talent and pushed her to aim high. She got her PhD at age 26 with a dissertation that won national awards. Everyone said she had a bright future, but the math world wasn't always fair. At conferences, men would talk over her. Some assumed she was a secretary, not a mathematician. When she applied for jobs, universities would pick men with fewer accomplishments. She had to work twice as hard to get half as far. That's when Linda started noticing patterns in success. It wasn't just about being smart. It was about connections, about privilege, about doors being open for some people that stayed closed for others. She began studying the lives of famous self-made success stories. She found that many had wealthy parents, went to top schools, or had powerful mentors. Few truly started from nothing. The more she studied, the more convinced she became that luck and privilege played bigger roles than most people admitted. Her math and society class became her platform. In it, she used math to examine questions of fairness and opportunity. Students loved it. They said it opened their eyes to how the world really worked. The Elon Musk lecture was supposed to be the high point of the semester. She had spent weeks preparing it, gathering data about his companies, his background, his education. She wanted to show that even famous geniuses weren't as special as people thought. And now, here he was, standing at her whiteboard, having just made her look foolish instead. "Mr. Musk," Linda said, trying to sound calm, "I have to say this is quite unusual. Do you often show up unannounced to classes where people are discussing you?" Elon gave a small shrug. "First time, actually. I saw some tweets about today's lecture and got curious." "Well," Linda said, straightening her jacket. "Since you're here, perhaps you'd like to address some of the points I was making about how successful people often benefit from advantages others don't have." She was trying to regain control of the situation. To turn this disaster into a teaching moment somehow, Elon looked around at all the eager faces watching him. "I think success comes from a mix of things. Hard work matters. So does talent. And yes, luck plays a part, too. But surely you must admit," Linda pressed, "that many doors were open to you that remained closed to others?" Before Elon could answer, a student raised her hand. Linda called on her, grateful for the interruption. "Professor Martinez," the student said, "I'm confused. You said Mr. Musk couldn't possibly understand the complex math behind his companies, but he just solved your impossible rocket equation. Doesn't that disprove your whole point?" The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Linda. She felt her face growing hot again. "That's..." She started, then stopped. What could she say? The evidence was right there on the board. "That's a fair question," she admitted. Elon stepped forward. "Look, I didn't come here to embarrass anyone. I know many people have questions about how I run my companies or how I got where I am. I'm happy to talk about that, but maybe we could make this a conversation instead of a lecture?" Some students clapped at this suggestion. Linda felt her carefully, constructed lessons slipping further away. But she was a scientist at heart. When facts disproved her theory, she had to adjust. "Very well," she said, setting down her notes. "Let's have a conversation. She had no idea this was just the beginning of a much stranger journey than she could possibly imagine. Elon looked around the classroom, surprised by the turn of events. This morning, he never expected to end up solving math problems in front of college students. It had all started with a simple notification on his phone. Elon's day began like many others. He woke up early, checked his messages, and scrolled through social media while drinking his first coffee. That's when he saw the tweets from Bay Area University students. Professor Martinez is going to destroy Elon Musk in class today. Can't wait. Finally, someone smart enough to expose that fraud. Jotter Elon, not a genius. Martinez versus Musk. The takedown of a fake genius happening today at BAU. At first, Elon just rolled his eyes. People said things about him online all the time. Some were nice. Many were mean. He had learned to ignore most of it. But something about this was different. It wasn't just random people being mean. It was a university professor telling students that everything he had worked for was just luck. He looked up Professor Linda Martinez. Her page on the university website showed an impressive list of awards and published papers. She was clearly brilliant at math. Real math. Not just business numbers. Her math and society class was one of the most popular on campus. What if I just went to see for myself, he thought. The idea seemed silly at first. He had meetings scheduled all day. Important decisions were waiting. He couldn't just drop everything to sit in on some college class. But the thought wouldn't leave him. All morning, as he showered and got dressed, he kept thinking about it. Something about being called a fraud by someone who had never met him really bothered him. By 9:30, he had made up his mind. He canceled his meetings, telling his assistant he had a personal matter to handle. Then he looked in his closet for the plainest clothes he could find. Most people expected Elon Musk to arrive in fancy cars, wearing expensive suits. But today, he pulled on old jeans, a plain gray t-shirt, and a worn blue baseball cap. He hadn't shaved in a few days, which gave him a short beard. Looking in the mirror, he barely recognized himself. Perfect, he thought. Nobody will look twice. He drove himself to campus in his least flashy car. Finding the lecture hall was easy. He just followed the stream of excited students. He slipped in just as class was starting and took a seat in the back row. Now, standing at the front of the classroom with everyone staring at him, Elon felt strangely calm. The disguise was gone. There was no more hiding. In a way, it was a relief. So, Linda said, breaking the awkward silence that had fallen over the room. Since we're having a conversation now, I'm curious. Why exactly did you come to my class today? You must have known I was going to be critical of you. Elon nodded. I saw the tweets. At first, I was just curious, but then I started thinking about how often people make assumptions about me without ever talking to me. I thought maybe I could change that, at least with one person. A student raised her hand. Did you know Professor Martinez was going to call you to the board? Elon laughed. No, that was a surprise. I was just planning to listen. But when I saw the problem. You couldn't resist showing off, Linda suggested, a hint of sharpness in her voice. I wouldn't call it showing off, Elon replied. But when you love solving problems as much as I do, it's hard to sit by when one is right in front of you. Linda studied him carefully. She had spent years forming opinions about wealthy tech leaders. She had built her class around exposing their advantages and privileges. But now, facing one in person, she felt her certainty wavering just a bit. The math you did, she said, pointing to the board. Where did you learn to solve problems at that level? Elon's eyes lit up at the question. Math had been his first love long before rockets or electric cars or tunnels. I've always been good with numbers, he said. When I was a kid, I taught myself programming. By the time I was 12, I had sold my first video game. In college, I studied physics and business. Both require understanding complex systems. But that specific problem requires knowledge of rocket engineering and advanced calculus, Linda pressed. I read a lot, Elon said simply. And when we were starting SpaceX, I had to learn rocket science from the ground up. Nobody was going to do it for me. As they talked, the students watched with fascination. It wasn't often you got to see two brilliant minds from different worlds having an honest conversation. May I ask you something personal? Elon said suddenly. Linda looked surprised but nodded. Why did you choose this topic for today's class? Out of all the successful people you could have discussed, why focus on me? The question caught Linda off guard. She thought about giving her standard answer about examining privilege and luck. But something about the moment called for honesty. Because you're different, she admitted. Most wealthy CEOs inherit their position or come from money. Their stories fit neatly into my theories about privilege. But yours doesn't quite fit. And things that don't fit bother me. For the first time since the chaos erupted, Elon smiled broadly. That I understand completely. Things that don't fit bother me too. That's usually where the most interesting problems are hiding. A bell rang, signaling the end of class time. Students groaned, not wanting the unusual session to end. Professor? A student called out. Are we still having the quiz on Friday? Linda had completely forgotten about the quiz. The day's events had thrown everything off track. She looked at her notes, then at Elon, who was now surrounded by students asking for photos. An idea struck her. A crazy, impulsive idea that went against everything she had planned. The quiz is cancelled, she announced. Instead, we're going to try something different. She had no idea how much her life was about to change. Everyone, please settle down, Linda called over the noise. Students were crowding around Elon, phones out, questions flying. Mr. Musk needs some space. Elon gave her a grateful look as the crowd reluctantly backed away. Since we still have some time left, Linda continued, I'd like to try something. She walked to the whiteboard and erased her first problem. Then she wrote a new, even more complex equation. This one filled the entire board. It had multiple integrals, differential equations, and variables that most students had never seen before. The room went quiet as everyone stared at the intimidating wall of symbols and numbers. This, Linda said with renewed confidence, is a problem I've been working on for my research. It models atmospheric carbon capture efficiency using a new mathematical approach I'm developing. She turned to face Elon. You solved my rocket problem. Let's see how you do with climate science. Students exchanged glances. Professor Martinez was famous for her tough problems, but this was on another level. Was she trying to embarrass Elon now or genuinely curious about his abilities? Elon studied the board carefully, hands in his pockets. He walked closer, tracing parts of the equation with his eyes. The room was so quiet you could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Interesting approach, he said finally. You're using chaos theory to model atmospheric carbon flows. He pointed to a section of the equation. This part looks familiar, but you've added something I haven't seen before. Linda was surprised. He had immediately recognized what she was working on, even though it was cutting-edge research she hadn't published yet. The standard models treat the atmosphere as too uniform, she explained, forgetting for a moment that she was supposed to be challenging him. I'm trying to account for localized turbulence patterns that affect carbon concentration, Elon nodded. That makes sense, but wouldn't you need to? He trailed off, then picked up a marker and added a term to her equation. If you include this factor for altitude-dependent density variations, your model might be more accurate. Linda stared at his addition. It was exactly what she had been struggling with for weeks. How had he seen it so quickly? That's actually very helpful, she admitted. A student in the front row raised his hand. Professor, I'm confused. I thought you were trying to prove Mr. Musk isn't actually good at math. The blunt question made several students laugh nervously. Linda felt her face grow warm. Science isn't about proving what we already believe, she said after a moment. It's about following the evidence, even when it challenges our assumptions. She turned back to Elon. You clearly understand advanced mathematics, but my larger point still stands. Success in business comes from many factors beyond intelligence. Luck, timing, connections, access to capital, these all play huge roles. I don't disagree, Elon said, surprising her again. I've been incredibly lucky in many ways. Right place, right time, meeting the right people. But luck alone isn't enough. For every successful tech entrepreneur, there are thousands of equally smart people who never get the same opportunities, Linda countered. The students watched this back and forth like a tennis match. No one wanted to interrupt. That's true, Elon nodded. The system isn't fair, but that doesn't mean success is just random either. He turned to the class. How many of you have a business idea you think could work? Something you've thought about building? About half the students raised their hands. And how many of you have actually tried to build it? Started coding? Made a prototype? Anything like that? Most hands went down. Only 3 or 4 remained. Up. That's the first filter, Elon said. Most people never start. Of those who do start, most give up when it gets hard. Of those who keep going, most run out of money or energy before they succeed. That doesn't contradict what I was saying, Linda said. Those who keep going often have safety nets. Others don't. They can afford to fail. Sometimes, Elon agreed, but not always. When I started my first company, I lived in the office and showered at the YMCA because I couldn't afford rent. I had student loans to pay back. There was no safety net. Linda hadn't known this detail about his life. It didn't fit the story she had constructed. A student who had been quiet until now spoke up. So who's right? Is success about privilege or hard work? Linda and Elon looked at each other. For a moment, neither spoke. Both, they said at the same time, then looked surprised at their agreement. Success is multivariable, Linda said, falling back on mathematical terms. No single factor explains it all. Exactly, Elon nodded, and different factors matter more in different situations. The bell rang again, this time signaling that they had run over the class period. Students from the next class were already waiting outside the door. We have to wrap up, Linda said. She turned to the class. For next time, I want you to research a successful person and identify the various factors that contributed to their rise. Look beyond the simple narratives. As students gathered their things, Linda turned to Elon. Thank you for being a good sport about all this. It didn't go how I expected, but it was educational. Elon smiled. For me, too. Your carbon capture problem is fascinating. Are you working with anyone to implement real-world applications? No, Linda said. It's purely theoretical at this point. It doesn't have to be, Elon replied. What if we continued this conversation somewhere else? I have some people you might want to meet. Linda hesitated. Part of her wanted to refuse on principle, but the mathematician in her was curious about where this might lead. I'm free tomorrow afternoon, she found herself saying. Neither of them realized they were being watched by someone who had plans of their own. As Linda and Elon walked out of the lecture hall together, a young woman with short brown hair followed them at a distance. Tara Chen was for the university newspaper, and she knew a big story when she saw one. She snapped photos with her phone while staying just far enough away to avoid being noticed. This is going viral, she whispered to herself. Meanwhile, Elon and Linda stopped in the hallway, continuing their conversation about the carbon capture equation. The traditional models all have the same flaw, Linda explained. They treat the Echandishare atmosphere as a single uniform system, but reality is much messier, Elon nodded. That's the challenge with most climate models. They simplify too much. As they talked, Linda couldn't help wondering about the man standing in front of her. How had he developed such a deep understanding of mathematics? The public image of Elon Musk focused on his business success and wild tweets, not his technical abilities. I'm curious, she said. When did you first get interested in math? A shadow crossed Elon's face, and for a moment, he seemed far away. I was very young, he said, maybe 6 or 7. Numbers made sense when nothing else did. What he didn't say was that math had been his escape during a difficult childhood. Growing up in South Africa, he had been badly bullied at school. Other kids found him strange, too quiet, too absorbed in his own thoughts. They pushed him around, mocked him, and once even shoved him down a flight of stairs, sending him to the hospital. At home, he would lock himself in his room with math books borrowed from the library. While other kids played sports, he solved equations. By age 12, he had worked through entire college-level calculus textbooks. Numbers never judged him. Equations didn't beat him up or call him names. In the world of mathematics, his mind could soar free from the pain of his daily life. Each solved problem was a small victory, a reminder that he had worth. When he was 14, his family got their first computer. Elon taught himself programming within 3 days by reading manuals. Soon he was creating his own video games, turning mathematical concepts into virtual worlds. Later, when starting his first company, Elon surprised the programmers he hired. Most business founders had broad ideas but couldn't understand the technical details. Elon was different. He could dive into the code himself, spotting errors and suggesting improvements. The programmers whispered among themselves, "The boss actually knows what he's talking about." The same thing happened at SpaceX. Rocket engineers found themselves being questioned by their CEO about complex orbital mechanics. At first, they thought he was bluffing. Then they realized he had taught himself rocket science by reading textbooks and talking to experts. One engineer later recalled, "Most CEOs ask about costs and schedules. Elon asked about thrust-to-weight ratios and specific impulse calculations. It was like being quizzed by your toughest professor." Elon never bragged about these abilities. He didn't see his mathematical mind as special or remarkable. To him, it was just how his brain worked. If something interested him, he learned everything about it, down to the fundamental equations. But now, standing in the university hallway with Professor Martinez, his hidden talents were no longer hidden. "Math was like a language that made perfect sense to me," he told Linda. "When I was starting SpaceX, everyone said building affordable rockets was impossible. The equations said otherwise." Linda found herself genuinely interested. This wasn't the privileged CEO she had imagined. This was someone who spoke her language, the language of mathematics. "What about you?" Elon asked. "How did you get into mathematics?" The question caught Linda off guard. She was used to asking questions, not answering them. "I was always good at it," she said. "In school, math was where I shined. My father was an engineer, so numbers were valued in our home." What she didn't say was that mathematics had given her an identity. When other girls were praised for being pretty or nice, Linda was praised for being smart. She built her whole self around that idea. Linda Martinez, the girl who could solve any problem. As they continued talking, they discovered other similarities. Both had used their mathematical abilities to push into areas where they weren't initially welcome. Both faced doubters and critics. Both believed that the biggest problems in the world could be solved with enough creative thinking. "Your carbon capture model," Elon said, returning to their earlier discussion, "it has real potential. With some refinements, it could help guide actual atmospheric carbon removal projects." "That's the dream," Linda admitted. "But there's a big gap between equations on a board and machines in the field." Elon smiled. "Bridging that gap is what I do best." Before Linda could respond, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it and saw a news alert. Breaking. Elon Musk makes surprise appearance at Bay Area University. Challenges, professors' claims. A photo of the two of them leaving the classroom, taken only minutes ago, was posted below. "That was quick," she said, showing him the screen. Elon shrugged. "Welcome to my world. Everything becomes a headline. Will this cause a problem for you?" Linda inquired, suddenly concerned about causing him trouble. I'm used to it, he explained. But how about you? Your lecture did not go exactly as expected. Linda laughed, surprising herself. That is an understatement. I came to class prepared to use you as an example of unearned success. We're now discussing a research collaboration. Life is full of plot twists, Elon said. The question is, what happens in the next chapter? Neither noticed Tara Chen, who was still following them, recording every word and planning the explosive article she would write, nor did they realize the even bigger surprise that was just around the corner. As Linda and Elon walked across the university campus, heads turned. The students whispered and pointed. Some took photographs from a distance. The news was spreading quickly. Linda suggested that we find somewhere quiet to talk, as she was uncomfortable with all of the attention. They discovered an empty classroom and closed the door through the window. They noticed a small crowd gathering outside the building. Linda shakes her head and says, "This is surreal. I was preparing a lecture about why you aren't as smart as people think. We're hiding from students who want your autograph." Elon smiled. Life rarely goes as planned. I learned this the hard way. Linda sat on the edge of a desk, looking at him with curiosity. There is something I do not understand. You are one of the wealthiest people in the world. You run several businesses. You must have meetings and make decisions. How could you drop everything to attend my class today? That was a good question. Elon hesitated before responding. The truth is, I should not have come. My assistant is probably panicking right now. I have at least 10 missed calls. He took out his phone and showed her the screen filled with notifications. However, when I saw those tweets this morning, something clicked. What do you mean? Your class wasn't only about me. It was about the larger idea that success stems from privilege rather than ability. That bothers me because it implies that people's efforts are ineffective. He paused. I have failed more times than I can count. Those failures hurt. If it was all luck and privilege, why would failure be so painful? Linda considered this. She had always focused on some people's advantages, rather than the effort they put in despite those advantages. I still believe the playing field is not level, she said. It is not. Elon agreed. However, leveling it means lifting people up rather than tearing them down. Before Linda could respond, her phone buzzed again. This time, the university president sent an email requesting an immediate meeting. Great, she sighed. I am probably in trouble now. Elon inquired as to whether I wanted to accompany him. Linda was surprised by the offer. Would you do that? Why not? I'm one of the reasons you're in this situation. As they talked about what to do, neither of them noticed a small drone hovering outside the window. It was capturing their conversation through the glass. Tara Chen stood behind a tree, controlling it with her phone. This was going to be the biggest story of her career. Linda became suspicious once she returned to the classroom. Everything had happened so quickly. Too fast. Wait a minute, she said abruptly. How did you manage to find my class so easily? The campus is massive, and the room numbers change every semester. Elon appeared uncomfortable. I asked for directions. And the timing? You just happened to appear on the same day I was discussing you. I've told you. I noticed the tweets this morning. Linda crossed her arms. What about the math problem? You've solved it perfectly. There are even more improvements. Almost as if you had seen it before. I'm good at math, Elon stated simply. You saw it for yourself. Linda's thoughts were racing. Something was not adding up. And she was always aware when numbers didn't add up. It's too coincidental, she said. You arrived just as I was talking about you. Knowing precisely which problem to solve. Having the perfect response to everything I said. Elon seemed perplexed by her sudden shift in mood. What? Are you making a suggestion? Linda admitted, I don't know. However, in science, when something appears too perfect, we become suspicious. Outside, the crowd was getting larger. Students pressed their faces against the windows, attempting to see inside. Someone knocked on the door. "Professor Martinez? The university's president is looking for you." A voice called. Linda sighed. "I need to deal with this." She gathered her belongings and continued to watch Elon with newly cautious eyes. But the conversation is not over. As they exited the classroom, they were greeted by a swarm of students and multiple news cameras. Apparently, the word had spread beyond campus. "Mr. Musk, did you actually solve an impossible math problem to prove a professor wrong? Professor Martinez, has this shifted your perspective on privilege and success?" Linda pushed past the crowd, head down. Elon followed, appearing equally uncomfortable with the attention. They entered the administration building and were quickly led into the president's office. President Wilson, a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, waited for them. "Professor Martinez," she said calmly. "I understand you had an unexpected visitor in your classroom today." "Yes, ma'am," Linda responded. "It was unplanned." President Wilson turned to face Elon. "Mr. Musk, it is an honor to have you visit our campus." Her tone was noticeably warmer. "Thank you for having me," Elon politely replied. "Your visit has created quite a stir," President Wilson added. "Our website has crashed due to traffic. Reporters are asking for statements. Students are sharing videos everywhere." She looked at Linda. "This is not the way we usually conduct academic discussions." Linda felt her face flushing. "With all due respect, President Wilson, I was just teaching my class. Mr. Musk showed up unexpectedly and solved your impossible problem." President Wilson added. "Yes, I have watched the videos." Elon stepped in. "If I have caused any inconvenience, I apologize. That was not my intention." President Wilson's expression softened again. "No problem, Mr. Musk. In fact, this could be an excellent opportunity for the university." She smiled widely. "Would you like to give a formal talk while you're here? We could plan it for tomorrow." Before Elon could respond, a secretary burst into the office. "Madam President, I apologize for interrupting, but you need to see this." She handed over a tablet that displayed a news website. President Wilson widened her eyes as she read the exclusive headline. Elon Musk's secret campus visit had been planned all along. The article included quotes from their private conversation in the empty classroom, revealing the hidden agenda. Elon and Linda exchanged shocked looks. Someone had been listening to everything they said, and the story was about to become even stranger. President Wilson looked up from the tablet, her face a mix of concern and curiosity. "Is this correct, Mr. Musk? Was your visit planned?" Elon appeared genuinely perplexed. "Absolutely not. I made a snap decision this morning after reading some tweets." Linda took the tablet and read the article. It claimed that Elon's appearance was a publicity stunt to boost his image. According to an anonymous source close to Musk, Musk had been planning his surprise for Professor Martinez for weeks. "This is completely false," Elon stated, reading over her shoulder. "I'd never heard of Professor Martinez until today." Linda didn't know what to believe anymore. The coincidences bothered her, but Elon's confusion appeared genuine. "How did they get into our private conversation?" she wondered aloud. President Wilson took back the tablet. "That is concerning. We take privacy very seriously at this university." She turned to her secretary. "Find out who wrote this article and how they got the information." The secretary nodded and exited the room. In the meantime, President Wilson persisted. "We have a situation to handle. There are reporters gathered outside. Students are posting videos. We need to make a statement." Before anyone could respond, Linda's phone rang with a text message from an unknown number. "I have more recordings. Meet me at the campus coffee shop in 20 minutes if you want to know the truth. Come alone." Linda looked at her phone, her heart racing. She conveyed the message to Elon and President Wilson. It is a trap. President Wilson responded immediately. Do not go. Or it's someone who understands what's going on. Linda countered. She looked at Elon. What are your thoughts? Elon thought for a moment. I believe we need answers. But don't go alone. The message specifically states that you should come alone. Linda made a point. Then I'll observe from a distance. Elon suggested. I'm pretty good at going unnoticed when I need to be. President Wilson shook her head. This is getting out of control. I should contact campus security. Linda said, please wait. Let me try to figure out what's going on first. Maybe it's just a student seeking attention. After some debate, they agreed on Linda's plan. She would meet the mysterious texter while Elon observed from a nearby table. President Wilson would wait in her office for the report. Linda sat at a corner table in the crowded campus coffee shop about 20 minutes later. Students whispered and pointed, but most stayed away, too afraid to approach. Linda checked her watch. It was the exact meeting time. She looked around but did not see anyone approaching her table. Her phone vibrated again. Look up. Linda looked up and saw a young woman with short brown hair sitting at a table across the room. She recognized Tara Chin, a student from her class who sat in the back and rarely spoke. Tara motioned for Linda to join her. Linda looked at Elon, who was pretending to read a newspaper at a table near the door. He nodded slightly. Linda approached and sat across from Tara. You're the person who sent the text? Tara smiled. Professor Martinez, thank you for coming. You said you had recordings. Linda kept her voice low. I do. Tara took out her phone. I'm a reporter for the university newspaper. I have been following you since you left the classroom. She showed Linda a small drone in her bag. This has been my eye in the sky. Linda experienced a burst of anger. That is an invasion of privacy. Tara responded, it's journalism. And I'm glad I was watching because I saw something interesting. She turned her phone to show Linda and I. He made a video. It showed Elon walking across campus earlier that day, before class. He was speaking with someone, a man in a suit who appeared vaguely familiar. Linda replied, perplexed, that's Dean Roberts from the engineering department. Exactly, Tara declared triumphantly. They gathered for 15 minutes before your class. So much for the spontaneous visit story. Linda's suspicions flooded back. Do you have audio? No, they were too far away. However, body language can convey a lot. Tara swiped to another video of Elon and the dean studying papers together. It appears planned to me. From across the room, Elon noticed Linda's expression change. He set down his newspaper and walked over. Mind if I join you? He asked. Tara's eyes widened. Elon Musk is at my table. This day is getting better. I understand you have footage of me, Elon said as he sat down. Tara showed him the videos Elon had carefully watched, and both women were surprised when he laughed. Is there something funny? Tara inquired. Very, Elon responded. That is not Dean Roberts I am speaking with. That's David Mercer, my company's attorney. He was here because his daughter was visiting the campus. We met for coffee because I had cancelled all of my appointments to come here. Linda was not convinced. And the papers you were looking at contained release forms for patents that we are making public. I needed to sign them today. So David delivered them to me. Elon took out his phone and showed them an email with attached documents. See the timestamp? This morning, after I made the decision to come here. Tara seemed disappointed. So there is no conspiracy? No plans to humiliate Professor Martinez? None, Elon stated firmly. I understand why it might appear suspicious. Linda felt a combination of relief and embarrassment. Her suspicions had been incorrect. Tara wasn't prepared to give up. Then why did you attend her class? A billionaire CEO does not suddenly drop everything because of some tweets. That was a good question. Elon thought for a moment before responding. When I saw those tweets, something clicked, he said. People have consistently underestimated me throughout my life. They claimed that my success was due to luck or privilege. He looked at Linda. Your class touched a nerve because it reminded me of everyone who has ever told me I couldn't do something. Linda was taken aback by his candor. She had already misjudged him twice. First, let's assume he wasn't very smart. Then assuming he had a hidden agenda. I owe you an apology, she explained quietly. And I owe you both a story, Tara added. The true story, not the one that some websites published. They talked for another hour, with Tara asking insightful questions about education, opportunity, and success. By the end, Elon and Linda were finishing each other's sentences and expanding on each other's ideas like old colleagues. As they were leaving, Elon turned to Linda and discussed the carbon capture problem. I was serious about discovering real-world applications. Linda admitted that she was still unsure whether her equations were ready for that. Elon replied, there's only one way to find out. Are you interested in visiting SpaceX tomorrow? Want to see some actual rocket science up close? Linda hesitated briefly. That would be educational. Great. Elon smiled. I will send a car for you in the morning. As they parted ways, neither of them noticed the man watching from across the street. He spoke quietly into his cell phone. They are leaving now. Yes, she has agreed to visit the facility. The plan is working perfectly. The real agenda remained hidden, waiting to be revealed. Linda awoke early the next morning. She had not slept well. Her mind kept replaying the events of the day before, how her carefully planned lecture had devolved into a media circus, how her beliefs about Elon had been challenged, and how she had agreed to visit SpaceX. What am I doing? She asked her reflection as she dressed. Part of her wanted to cancel and return to her normal life of teaching and research. But another part of her was very curious about what she might see at SpaceX. Her doorbell rang precisely between 8 and 1 a.m. Outside, there was a sleek black car with the driver holding the door open. Professor Martinez, I am here to take you to SpaceX. The drive took almost 2 hours. Linda watched the familiar cityscape give way to industrial areas, and then to the massive SpaceX facility. As they approached the main building, she noticed a figure waiting outside. It was not Elon. As Linda stepped out of the car, a tall woman with short blonde hair and a crisp blue suit approached her. Professor Martinez, this is Samantha Wells, Mr. Musk's chief of staff. She extended her hand. He asked me to show you around. He will join us later for lunch. Linda experienced a twinge of disappointment, which surprised her. Of course. Thank you for accommodating this visit at such short notice. Samantha smiled. Short notice is normal around here. Follow me, please. The tour was impressive. Samantha guided Linda through the massive factory floor where rockets were assembled, the control room where launches were monitored, and the engineering labs where new designs were tested. Linda noticed the workers' intense focus in each area. These weren't just jobs for them. These were missions. And the mathematics she saw on whiteboards and computer screens was advanced, similar to the problems she assigned her best graduate students. Samantha led Linda into a smaller lab, our Environmental Systems Division, which she thought Linda would be most interested in. The lab was filled with engineers working on what appeared to be large air filtering systems. A man wearing a lab coat approached them. Professor Martinez, it is an honor to meet you. I'm Dr. Chen, the lead engineer for atmospheric carbon capture. He shook her hand with enthusiasm. We have been following your research for months. Linda was shocked. Have you? Of course. Your mathematical models for turbulent carbon flow are groundbreaking. We've tried to apply some of your equations to our filtration systems. It was unexpected. Linda had published her work in academic journals, but she had no idea private companies were using it. Dr. Chen showed her their current prototype, a large machine that extracts carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and converts it into solid carbon that can be safely stored. The issue, he explained, is efficiency. We can remove carbon, but the energy costs are prohibitively high for large-scale deployment. That's where your equations come in, said another engineer, pointing to a whiteboard covered in familiar-looking math. If we can optimize the airflow using your turbulence models, we could increase efficiency by 30%. Linda studied the equations. They had indeed used her work, but with some changes she had not anticipated. You've included variables for temperature stratification, she observed. Yes, Dr. Chen stated, essential for real-world conditions, but we are stuck on this section. He pointed out a particularly complicated part of the equation. The mathematics is broken down by scale. Linda immediately recognized the problem. You are treating the capture surface as uniform, which is impossible at that size. She picked up a marker and started writing on the board. The engineers gathered around, paying close attention as she worked through the problem. Linda had devised a new strategy to address their scaling issues 20 minutes later. The engineers were enthusiastic, asking questions and suggesting improvements. Linda experienced a rush of satisfaction. This was applied mathematics at its best, with real-world solutions to important problems. I see you've met our carbon capture team, a familiar voice said through the doorway. Everyone turned to see Elon standing there, smiling. Mr. Musk and Dr. Chen straightened up. Professor Martinez has just helped us make a breakthrough on the scaling problem. Elon nodded. I am not surprised. That's why I invited her to visit. He turned to Linda. Are you ready for lunch? I believe we have a lot to discuss. They entered a private dining room with large windows overlooking the rocket assembly area. Linda grew fonder of Elon as they ate together. He posed insightful questions about her work and shared his own struggles with difficult engineering problems. Why didn't you tell me that your company was already using my research? She asked. Finally, Elon appeared slightly guilty. I wanted you to see it for yourself, without preconceptions. If I had told you right away, you might have assumed I was simply trying to use your work without credit. Linda considered this. That is true. I would probably have been suspicious. You were suspicious anyway. Elon indicated with a small smile. Okay, fair enough. Linda laughed. I've been wrong about a lot of things recently. Like, what? Elon asked. Linda took a deep breath. Assume that your success was due to privilege rather than ability. Imagine thinking you couldn't possibly understand complex mathematics. As if you had some ulterior motive for attending my class. Elon's expression became serious. These are common misconceptions. But they are important because they shape how young people perceive the world. If they believe that success is primarily due to luck and privilege, why should they work hard? Why should they take risks? But privilege exists. Linda countered. Some people start with advantages. Absolutely. Elon agreed. I've had many advantages in life, but benefits alone cannot build rockets or solve climate change. They do not persevere in the face of failure or work 100-hour weeks. Linda considered the dedicated engineers she had just met. About their joy when she helped them solve their problem. They weren't working those long hours solely for a paycheck. They were confident in what they were doing. Perhaps we're both correct, she said. Perhaps success stems from a combination of privilege, ability, and effort. And different people require varying amounts of each. That's more nuanced than either of us was yesterday, Elon said with approval. They continued talking after lunch. Elon suggested that Linda consult with the carbon capture team on a regular basis. She found herself agreeing before she could think it through. As they walked back to the building, Elon came to a sudden stop. I've got a proposal for you. What type of proposal? Linda inquired cautiously. I would like to fund a research position. For you. Split your time between university and here. Concentrate on applied carbon capture mathematics. Linda was stunned. That's extremely generous. It's not charity, Elon clarified quickly. It is an investment. Your efforts could help us remove billions of tons of carbon from the atmosphere. That's worth far more than what I'd pay you. Samantha approached them quickly, looking concerned, before Linda could respond. Sorry for interrupting, but you have a situation to handle, Elon. She immediately showed him something on her tablet. His expression darkened. What is it? Linda asked. Elon hesitated before turning the tablet so she could see. The headline read, Tech billionaire poaches university professor for secret climate project. What exactly is Elon Musk planning? The article included details about their lunch conversation. Nobody else should know these details. Someone is listening to us, Elon said grimly. But how? Linda remembered what Tara had said about using a drone to spy. Could somebody be using surveillance technology? In my own building? Elon seemed both angry and concerned. That would necessitate special access. They looked at each other, thinking the same thing. There was someone working against them from within SpaceX. The hidden agenda was beginning to surface. We need to figure out who is leaking our conversations, Elon said. His voice is tense. He turned to face Samantha. Call security. I'd like to take a quick overview of where we've been today. Samantha nodded and moved away to make the call. Linda glanced around nervously. Could it be a listening device or more drones, similar to the one Tara used? Possibly, Elon responded. But SpaceX maintains strict security. Bringing in unauthorized devices is not easy. He ran his hand through his hair, visibly frustrated. Someone is eager to learn more about what we are discussing. Linda suggested that he or she wants to create drama. These news stories make it appear as if we are planning something sinister. Elon's phone vibrated. He examined it and frowned. I've received a call from the university president. News is spreading quickly. Linda reflected on everything that had happened as Elon took the phone call. Yesterday morning, she was just a math professor preparing for a lecture. She was now in the midst of what felt like a spy thriller, complete with leaked conversations and mysterious agendas. When Elon finished his call, his expression became even more serious. President Wilson claims reporters are swarming the campus. Students are speculating online about why you're at SpaceX. Some claim I've hired you to build weapons. Linda exclaimed, That's ridiculous. Elon greeted me with a grim smile. Everything I do is twisted to the worst possible interpretation. Samantha returned with a security officer, a tall woman with short gray hair and bright eyes. Samantha explained that Ms. Rogers will coordinate the security sweep. In the meantime, we should relocate you to a secure room. They followed Ms. Rogers into a conference room with no windows. It only had a table, chairs, and a whiteboard. Ms. Rogers assured them that the room is regularly checked for devices. You may speak freely here. After she left, Linda and Elon sat across from each other at the table for a moment. Neither spoke. I'm sorry about everything, Elon said finally. I did not intend to drag you into a media circus. Linda replied, It's not your fault, though I must admit that this is not how I expected my week to go. Despite the stress, Linda smiled. There was something exciting about this. Her usual life of lectures and research papers suddenly appeared very quiet in comparison. Elon suggested that we use this time to figure out what's going on. Let's consider who could benefit from spying on us. They created a list of possibilities. Competitors seeking SpaceX secrets, journalists looking for scoops, activists opposed to Elon Musk's businesses, and even foreign governments interested in the technology. Linda pointed out that none of this explains why they are so interested in you talking to me. I am just a math professor. Why should anyone care about our conversations? Elon tapped his fingers on the table, thinking. Unless they know something. We do not. Consider how your work might be applied. My carbon capture equations? Yes. What if your mathematical approach had applications beyond what we've discussed? Something worth spying on? Linda considered this. Her research was theoretical, focusing on turbulent flow patterns in atmospheric gases. Our carbon capture application was just one option. My equations represent how gases mix and separate in complex environments, she explained. It could have other uses, but nothing seems worth the trouble. Elon's eyes brightened suddenly. Unless it can be used in air purification systems for long-duration spaceflight. Spaceflight? Would you like to visit Mars? Exactly. One of the most difficult challenges for Mars missions is developing long-term life support systems. If your equations could improve efficiency by just 10%, that would be a game changer. Linda experienced a surge of excitement. She'd never considered space applications for her work. That does make sense, she admitted. The mathematical principles would be similar, albeit in a closed system rather than an open atmosphere. Elon stood up and approached the whiteboard. Let us think this through. They spent the next hour working together, covering the board with equations and diagrams. Linda was impressed with Elon's quick grasp of the complex mathematics. He wasn't simply following. He was contributing, making connections she hadn't noticed. They were so focused on their work that they didn't notice when Samantha knocked and entered the room. Security had finished their sweep, she announced. They found it. She held up a small black device, no bigger than a button. What is it? Linda asked. Elon took it from Samantha and said it was an advanced listening device. Military grade. Where was it? Samantha responded, from the dining room where you had lunch. It was underneath the table. Can they trace who put it there? Samantha shakes her head. Not yet, but they are reviewing security footage. Elon put the device on the table and stared at it. Someone went to great lengths to understand what we were saying. Samantha replied hesitantly, Mr. Musk. There is something else. Dr. Reeves would like to speak with both of you. Marcus Reeves, the leader of our Mars program? Yes, he says it is urgent. Elon and Linda exchanged looks. Send him in, Elon decided. Dr. Reeves was a tall man with a well-trimmed beard and serious eyes. He entered, holding a tablet and looking nervous. He said, Thank you for seeing me. I think I understand what's going on. He placed the tablet on the table. When I learned Professor Martinez was visiting, I researched her work. That's when I discovered this. He showed them a scientific article published in a Russian journal. It describes detailed experiments using mathematical models similar to Linda's to improve air filtration in closed environments, particularly nuclear submarines. The authors refer to your early work, Professor, Dr. Reeves explained. They have been expanding on your equations for military applications. Linda was stunned. I had no idea. My research is purely theoretical, but it has many practical applications. Dr. Reeves proceeded. And not only for submarines. The same principles could apply to space habitats and bunkers. He paused. Even what? Elon prompted the development of more efficient chemical weapons delivery systems. Dr. Reeves finished quietly. The mathematics of gas dispersion can be used to either purify or contaminate air. The room became silent as they processed this information. So someone might think we're working together on weapons development. Linda spoke slowly. This is why they are spying on us. It would explain the news stories that attempted to make our meeting appear suspicious. Elon agreed. Dr. Reeves nodded. There is one more thing you should know. The lead author of this paper, Dr. Petrov, is currently in California. He arrived 3 days ago to attend a conference at Bay Area University. Linda gave a gasp. How long ago? 3 days. That was before Elon attended my class. Before you publicly criticized me, Elon added, his eyes widening in realization. You think Dr. Petrov is involved? Linda asked. I believe it is a remarkable coincidence that a Russian scientist who has been adapting your work for military purposes happened to be at your university when it all began. Elon responded. Linda's thoughts were racing. Could her equations be useful enough for international espionage? It seemed far-fetched, but the evidence pointed in that direction. What should we do now? She asked. Elon thought for a moment before smiling. It was not a reassuring smile, but rather one that indicated he had just had a dangerous idea. I believe, he said slowly, we should give them something worth spying on. Linda stared at Elon. What do you mean by that? Elon explained the trap, his eyes bright with excitement. We give them false information and make them believe we are developing something revolutionary based on your equations. Dr. Reeves seemed concerned. Playing games with international spies is not a good idea, Mr. Musk. It's not a game, Elon said. It's a way to figure out who is behind this. If we tell a convincing story, whoever is spying will reveal themselves through their actions. Linda was unsure what to think. Everything was moving very quickly. Yesterday, she was teaching calculus. She met with a billionaire today to discuss counterintelligence operations. What would this fictitious project be? She asked. Elon moved to the whiteboard. It must be plausible while also exciting enough to pique their interest. He wrote, Project Atmosphere, at the top of the board. We'll say we're creating a new carbon capture system using Professor Martinez's equations. One that is infinitely more efficient than anything currently available. That sounds plausible, Dr. Reeves agreed, but not necessarily worth spying on. Elon continued, the hook is that it could work on Mars. A system that efficiently manages the thin Martian atmosphere may be the key to terraforming. Linda's scientific thinking kicked in. Technically, my equations could apply to Martian atmospheric conditions, but the parameters would need to be adjusted significantly. Perfect, Elon stated. We'll work on some convincing equations that are valid enough to pass inspection, but with a fundamental flaw that only we are aware of. Dr. Reeves still appeared skeptical. How does this help us identify the spy? Elon explained that we have control over who has access to what information. Different details for different people. When those details become public, we will know who the source was. They discussed the plan, and it began to take shape. They would create documentation for the Project Atmosphere, distribute specific versions to key personnel, and then wait to see which version appeared in leaks. Linda said it still feels risky. What if it exacerbates the situation? Elon noted that the situation has already escalated. Someone had planted a military-grade listening device in my facility. I want to know who and why. Linda reluctantly agreed to the plan following further discussion. They spent the next few hours developing convincing technical documents, taking care to include unique identifiers in each version. By the evening, everything was ready. Samantha distributed the documents to the selected personnel, each of whom received a slightly different version of the project information. Now we wait, Elon said as he led Linda to the car that would take her home. Keep your phone close. If our spy falls for the bait, things could get messy quickly. Linda laughed nervously as she admitted that this was not how she had expected her week to go. Elon smiled. Life's most interesting moments rarely announce themselves ahead of time. Linda could not stop thinking about what had happened as she rode home. Working with Elon had been surprising in a variety of ways. He was not the privileged CEO she had envisioned. He genuinely understood the mathematics, provided valuable insights, and appeared to be deeply committed to using technology to solve climate problems. Had she been mistaken about him all along? Or was there more to the story than she realized? Linda awoke the next morning to multiple missed phone calls from Elon. She called him right back. It worked, he said without elaboration. They took the bait. A Russian science website recently published an article about Project Atmosphere, which included details previously only available to Dr. Petrov's university contact. Who was the contact? Linda asked. A professor named Victor Hammond. Do you know him? Linda gave a gasp. He is in the engineering department. We have served on several committees together. She paused, recalling something. He was extremely interested. When I mentioned my carbon capture equations last semester, people kept asking for copies of my unpublished work. That works, Elon said grimly. The question is, what should we do now? If Hammond is working with Petrov, confronting him directly may be dangerous. We need proof, Linda agreed. Something more than simply leaked documents. I have an idea, Elon said. Could you please meet me at the university in an hour? Your regular office? Linda agreed, curious about his plans. When she arrived at her office, Elon was already waiting outside, along with a man she did not recognize. This is Mike Jenkins, the head of security for all of my companies. Elon introduced him. He has prior experience dealing with similar situations. Mike nodded politely. Mr. Musk described the situation. If you're okay with it, I'd like to search your office for listening devices before setting up some surveillance equipment of our own. Linda hesitated briefly before unlocking her door. Go ahead. Mike worked efficiently, inspecting every surface in the small office. In the ceiling light fixture, he discovered another listening device similar to the one discovered at SpaceX. They've also been monitoring your conversations here, he explained, showing them the tiny device. This is not amateur work. Mike removed the bug, then installed small cameras and explained the plan. Linda would invite Professor Hammond into her office to discuss a breakthrough in her equations. If he were working with Petrov, his reaction would reveal a lot. Are you comfortable with this, Professor Martinez? Mike asked. It could be dangerous if Hammond suspects, you know. Linda thought about it. She was furious that someone had invaded her privacy, used her work without her permission, and could jeopardize her career. Linda Martinez a week ago would have called the cops and walked away from the situation. However, working with Elon had changed something in her. I'll do it, she stated firmly. My research is intended to benefit people, not to be weaponized. If Hammond is involved, I'd like to know. They scheduled the meeting for later in the afternoon. Linda mentioned a breakthrough in her carbon capture equations, and Hammond readily agreed. Linda felt nervous but determined while waiting for him to arrive. Elon and Mike were in an empty office next door, monitoring the camera feed and recording everything. When Hammond knocked on Linda's door, she took a deep breath and prepared to play her role in the trap. Victor, thank you for coming on such short notice, she said with a forced smile as she opened the door. Professor Hammond entered, looking exactly like he always did. A tall man with silver hair and glasses, wearing a tweed jacket with elbow patches. Nothing about him screamed, international spy. I was intrigued by your message, Linda, he said, taking a seat across from her desk. You mentioned a significant advancement in your equations. Linda nodded and opened her laptop. Yes, I have been working with some new collaborators. We had a breakthrough, which I wanted to share with a colleague. Linda paid close attention to Hammond's expression as she turned the laptop to show him the screen. The document displayed was titled Project Atmosphere, Mars Implementation Timeline. Linda would have missed Hammond's subtle change in expression if she hadn't been paying attention. A tightening around the eyes, a slight forward lean, and a level of interest that exceeded normal academic curiosity. This is amazing, he said as he studied the document. Who did you mention you were working with on this? The trap was set. Now all they needed was Hammond to walk in. This is quite impressive, Linda, Hammond said, adjusting his glasses as he examined the document. Your equations application to Martian atmospheric conditions is brilliant. Linda leant forward slightly. Yes, it went in an unexpected direction. I was surprised when the possibility arose. And you mentioned that you're working with new collaborators. Hammond's tone was casual, but his gaze was fixed on the screen. Yes, Linda responded. It's been a fascinating partnership. Hammond looked up at her. Anyone I might know? It was finally time for action. Linda took a deep breath. Actually, I've been working with Elon Musk and his SpaceX team. She paid close attention to Hammond's face. I was in their facility yesterday. Hammond's expression flickered. Surprise. Then there was what appeared to be a calculation. Elon Musk, he repeated. That is unexpected, especially given your lecture criticizing him. Linda shrugged. Sometimes life takes unexpected turns. He actually knows a lot more about mathematics than I expected. Hammond nodded slowly. And now that the project atmosphere is official, SpaceX is fully committed. Linda confirmed that we are moving forward quickly. The potential applications are too important to delay. Hammond returned his attention to the screen, his fingers lightly drumming on his chair's armrest. Have you thought about the implications beyond Mars? This technology could have significant applications on Earth, as Linda suggested. Well, atmospheric control systems have numerous applications. There are military applications for one. Hammond's tone was carefully neutral. Your equations could transform the way we think about air quality, submarines, bunkers, and even chemical protection systems. Linda experienced a chill. Hammond was practically confirming their suspicions now. I'm focused on the environmental benefits, she stated firmly. Carbon capture can help fight climate change. Hammond smiled thinly. Of course, that is admirable. However, the most important research often has several applications. He leaned forward. Linda, I know some people who would be very interested in this work. Individuals who could provide additional funding and resources. Linda inquired about the type of contacts. Research institutes with large budgets. Governments are interested in cutting-edge climate technologies. Hammond's gaze never left her. They pay handsomely for exclusive access to groundbreaking innovations. Linda pretended to consider it. I'd have to discuss it with Elon. We have already signed some preliminary agreements. Hammond's expression hardened slightly. I would advise you to keep your options open, Linda. Musk is a businessman first and foremost. He intends to profit from your efforts. And your contacts would not? They would pay you appropriately. Hammond stood up. Think about it. This could be extremely lucrative for you. Linda also stood. I'll consider it. Good. Hammond approached the door before coming to a halt. One more thing. Do you have any documentation that I could review? Technical specifications? What about the experimental data? Just so I can better explain the opportunities to my contacts? Linda hesitated before opening a drawer. I have the overview document. It's not overly detailed, but it provides a basic framework. She handed him a folder that Elon and Mike had prepared especially for this occasion. It contained enough real information to appear legitimate, as well as hidden markers that would allow it to be identified if shared. Thank you. Hammond tucked the folder beneath his arm. I'll be in touch shortly. This could be an extremely beneficial collaboration for both of us. Linda exhaled shakily after Hammond had left. A minute later, Elon and Mike walked in from the adjacent office. You did fantastically, Elon said, looking impressed. Very convincing. Mike nodded in agreement. We caught everything on camera. He essentially admitted to working with foreign interests. What will happen now? Linda asked. We'll follow him, Mike said, checking a small device in his hand. The documents you gave him contained a tracking chip embedded in the binding. We'll see where he goes and whom he meets. They switched to Mike's surveillance. A van parked nearby. Inside, screens displayed Hammond walking across campus. He was making a phone call. Can you hear what he's saying? Linda asked. Mike changed some settings. A scratchy voice echoed through the speakers. We're meeting with her right now. Yes, she has it. Working. With Musk himself. No, I don't believe she suspects anything. The documents appear to be genuine. Yes, I will bring everything tonight. Linda looked at Elon. Tonight? Mike checked the computer. Tonight there will be a reception at the city's Russian consulate. Academic exchange programs. That is where he will make the handoff, Elon stated. We need to be there. A consulate? Linda shakes her head. We cannot just walk in. Actually, we can. Elon smiled. I was invited. Last week there was a decline. But I can still say yes. Hours later, Linda entered the Russian consulate on Elon's arm, dressed elegantly in black. The reception was already in full swing. Diplomats, academics, and business leaders mingle over champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Linda whispered, I feel like I am in a spy movie. Just act naturally, Elon advised. We're just two colleagues out for an evening. They separated and circulated through the crowd, looking for Hammond. Linda noticed him near the bar, talking with a tall man she didn't recognize. That's Petrov, Elon murmured suddenly next to her. The scientist who referenced your work. Linda observed the man. He was middle-aged, with sharp features and calculating eyes. As she watched, Hammond passed something to Petrov. She had given him the folder earlier. He did the handoff, she whispered. Get ready, Elon responded. Things might be moving quickly now. Before Linda could ask what he meant, the room was filled with men dressed in dark suits. Mike had previously explained that they were FBI agents. They had been looking for evidence of classified information being shared with foreign nationals. As the agents were detaining Hammond and Petrov, a tall man approached Linda and Elon. Dr. Martinez, Mr. Musk, this is Agent Wilson from the FBI, and we need to speak with you. They were escorted to a private room where Agent Wilson explained the circumstances. We've been following Professor Hammond for months. He has been selling research with military applications to foreign entities. Your cooperation enabled us to catch him in the act. Linda said, I still don't understand why my equations were so valuable. Agent Wilson explained that your mathematical models of atmospheric gas behavior have applications that go beyond climate science. They can be used to predict how chemical agents will spread in different environments. Important information for both defensive and offensive military systems. Linda felt sick. Her work aimed at combating climate change could be weaponized. Agent Wilson continued, there's something else you should know. Hammond has been following your work for more than a year, even before you published your most recent findings. How is this possible? Linda asked. Agent Wilson opened a folder and moved a document across the table. It was an email from Hammond to Petrov sent 14 months ago. Martinez's new approach could be the breakthrough we've been looking for, it said. I'll continue to track her progress and keep you updated. Linda stared at the date, her thoughts racing. She had only started developing her new mathematical approach 14 months ago. She had only mentioned it to a few colleagues. Oh my God, she gasped. The mathematics department server. Hammond had administrative access as department chair last year. He could have seen my drafts and notes. Exactly. Agent Wilson nodded. He's been watching your work grow since the beginning. Elon, who had remained silent until now, leaned forward. There is still something bothering me. This all began when I showed up for Professor Martinez's class. That seems too coincidental. Agent Wilson smiled lightly. It was not a coincidence at all, Mr. Musk. Hammond planned it. What? Linda and Elon spoke simultaneously. The tweets you saw about Professor Martinez's lecture were sent by accounts linked to Hammond's network. He knew you were interested in education and mathematics. He was enticing you to attend. But why? Elon asked. We believe Hammond wanted to see if you two would collaborate. His foreign contacts are interested in the resources available through your companies. Professor Martinez's equations were useful, but when combined with your technology and funding, they'd hit the jackpot. Elon finished. Linda sat there, stunned. So Hammond orchestrated my lecture criticizing Elon, his surprise visit, and the entire meeting? Not all of it, Agent Wilson stated. He created the opportunity. But what happened after that, your collaboration, and the discoveries you made together, were real. Linda looked at Elon again, seeing him in a new light. Their chance meeting had not happened by chance, but something genuine had emerged as a result of Hammond's manipulation. There's one more thing you should know, Agent Wilson explained, sliding another document across the table. This was discovered in Hammond's office this afternoon. The paper was entitled Martinez Equation Applications Phase 2. Linda's blood cooled as she scanned it. She whispered, "This is not about carbon capture or air filtration. This is about weaponizing mathematical models." She couldn't complete the sentence. The implications were too terrifying. Elon read over her shoulder, his expression darkening. "We have to stop this," he said firmly. "Now." But stopping it would require something neither of them had expected. A mathematical breakthrough that would fundamentally alter their understanding of the universe. The next morning, Linda and Elon met in a secure room at FBI headquarters. Agent Wilson had recruited additional experts, mathematicians, physicists, and computer scientists from various government agencies. The mood was tense. Agent Wilson explained that Hammond's network is much larger than we initially thought. His contacts have already begun to use the weaponized version of your equations, Professor Martinez. How can we stop it? Linda asked. A woman in a navy blue suit stepped forward. Dr. Emily Chen, Department of Defense. We need to devise a mathematical countermeasure, which is essentially a flaw in the original equations that only we know about. Elon frowned. This will not work if they have already copied the equations. They'll just continue to use the version they have. Unless, Linda reasoned slowly, we can demonstrate that their version is fundamentally flawed in a way that they cannot detect without our assistance. Exactly. Dr. Chen nodded. We must find a deep structural flaw in the mathematical model itself. Something that only becomes apparent under certain circumstances. The team set to work. The FBI provided a secure lab where Linda and Elon could concentrate without distractions. The best mathematical minds in the country gathered remotely, sharing ideas and testing approaches. Days have passed. Linda barely slept, relying on coffee and determination. Elon matched her hour by hour. His ability to think across disciplines proved invaluable as they pushed the limits of mathematical theory. Linda stated on the fourth day that the problem is here, pointing to a section of equations that covered the entire whiteboard. The model works perfectly under normal atmospheric conditions, but there is a hidden instability at extreme parameters. Elon studied the equations like a bridge that appears stable until a specific frequency of wind causes it to collapse. Exactly. But proving it mathematically, Linda trailed off, the task appearing nearly impossible. Linda developed a new appreciation for Elon as they worked. His mind worked differently than hers, making connections and seeing patterns where she only saw formulas. When she became preoccupied with details, he pulled back to see the big picture. When he got too far ahead, she filled in the detailed steps required to prove each assertion. They were different, but complementary. Professor and entrepreneur, theorist and practical builder, each brilliant in their own way. On the seventh day, exhausted and frustrated, they hit a snag. The mathematics had become so complex that it seemed unsolvable. We need a new approach, Elon said, pacing the room. We are thinking too conventionally. Linda stared at the equations, her tired mind straining to concentrate. What if, she began, then paused, the concept seeming too far-fetched. What? Elon inquired. What if we're looking at this incorrectly? What if the pattern extends beyond atmospheric gases to include all complex systems? Linda stood up, feeling energized. What if the equations reveal something deeper about the universe? She rushed to the whiteboard, erasing and rewriting sections with feverish intensity. Elon observed, then began filling in the gaps as he caught her vision. The hours blurred together as they pursued this new path. Other experts joined in, adding pieces to the emerging puzzle. The mathematics evolved into something they had never seen before, a unified approach to modeling complex systems such as atmospheric gases, ocean currents, and cosmic radiation. And within this new framework, they discovered the fundamental flaw that would undermine Hammond's weaponized application. It's lovely, whispered Dr. Chen, staring at the final equation. This is not just a countermeasure, it is a completely new field of mathematics. Agent Wilson was more pragmatic. But will it disrupt Hammond's network? Linda replied confidently. Their models are based on a fundamentally flawed framework. Our equations prove it. When they attempt to deploy their systems at scale, the flaws will become painfully obvious. And the only solution, Elon added, is to understand the entire mathematical framework we've just created, which we control. Within hours, their findings were disseminated to intelligence agencies worldwide. When Hammond's network discovered that their prized equations were worthless, it began to unravel. Linda and Elon stood on the SpaceX building's roof 2 weeks later, gazing out at sunset. The immediate crisis was resolved. Hammond and his associates faced charges. Linda's work had been neutralized in terms of weaponization. So, Elon said, breaking their comfortable silence. What will happen now? Linda smiled. I teach my classes. You construct your rockets. Life returns to normal. Normal? Elon raised his eyebrow. After what we discovered? That mathematical framework has the potential to revolutionize dozens of fields. True, Linda admitted. We should probably prepare it for publication. I was thinking about something bigger, Elon explained. A joint research initiative. Your theoretical brilliance, combined with my practical applications. Linda considered this. A month ago, she would have rejected the idea outright. After everything they'd gone through, it all made sense. I'd like that, she replied. Nonetheless, I will continue to tell my students that success requires more than just being smart. And I agree with you, Elon responded, demonstrating that being smart does not hurt. They laughed, the tension from the previous weeks finally breaking. Linda paused as they turned back inside, looking at a specific section of equations in her notebook. There's something strange about this pattern, she said, pointing to a series of numbers. I've seen it everywhere since we created the framework. Elon leaned in. That's strange. It almost seems like. Like, what? Linda inquired when he went silent. Elon spoke quietly, as if he were signing something. This pattern appears to have been deliberately embedded. Linda examined it more closely. But that is impossible. We derived these equations from first principles. Nobody embedded anything. Unless. Elon looked up at the stars that were appearing in the darkening sky. Unless such patterns occur naturally in the universe. Unless someone else found them before us. Linda experienced a chill that had nothing to do with the evening breeze. You're suggesting that these mathematical patterns contain some sort of message? Elon turned a new page in her notebook. Consider the sequence when we extend it further. Linda gasped when she saw what appeared. The pattern was not random at all. It was structured, deliberate, and complex. She whispered, "This cannot be a coincidence." Elon agreed. It cannot. She turned her notebook to show Elon her discovery, just as the last light faded from the sky. What they saw challenged everything they thought they knew about mathematics, the universe, and humanity's place in it. The real challenge was only beginning. Thank you for watching. The liberal calculus professor attempts to humiliate Elon Musk. He has no idea he is a mathematical genius. We hope you enjoyed this unexpected story about brilliant minds, hidden agendas, and mathematical mysteries. Where are you watching from today? Please let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please click the like button. It's very helpful. Our channel is growing, and don't forget to check out the video on your screen right now for another exciting story you don't want to miss.